My name is Charles Mortensen, but I was called Mr. Diplomacy. I wasn't sharp or brilliant enough to deserve such a nickname, but in 25 years of working for the U.S. State Department, I developed the patience and flexibility to deal with any crisis. Now, at 62, I am living out my retirement days in my modest home in Montana. Like everyone else, I have a few things to say, especially about the documents I saw years ago and have never forgotten. But first I must tell you why I am a man worthy of seeing these documents. In 1959, I was born in a small town in Wisconsin to an ordinary farming family. I still remember the old farmhouse where my father milked milk from early morning until late at night and my mother baked bread. We had a simple life, but my dreams were always far away from that farm. The news about the outside world that I heard on my father's old radio was just a fairy tale to me then. But I wanted to follow those fairy tales. I became interested in politics in high school. When I won a scholarship to go to college, it was a small miracle for our family. I studied international relations at the University of Wisconsin, and after graduating in 1983, I started working for the State Department. My first assignment was in Eastern Europe. It was the last days of the Cold War and the world was on edge. I was young, enthusiastic, and naive enough to think I could change the world. I traveled to many countries during my career. Difficult negotiations, risky diplomatic missions, and secret meetings were my ordinary working days. My most interesting assignment, however, took place on a short-term assignment in Washington in 2008. Until then, nothing had surprised me as much as the documents I saw in that closed meeting room in the middle of the night. But before I get into that story, I want you to get to know me better, because it is more important to understand who a man is than what he says. During my years at the State Department, I spent most of my life keeping secrets, and now I am sharing them only because I think you deserve to know the truth. During my years of retirement, I thought long and hard about what I should do with this information. I knew that revealing it could lead to disaster or that no one would believe me. But today, the world seems more ready than ever to hear the truth. Everything I have seen in my life has had a consequence. For better or worse, the decisions I made as a diplomat are buried with me in the depths of history. But that event in 2008 was outside these rules. That year, with what I learned, I felt, even for a moment, that there was something beyond human history. And I don't think words are enough to describe that feeling to you. Up to this point in my life, I had been dedicated to my mission, but at some point, what I saw and what I learned made me realize that I had to question. We diplomats are often accused of covering up the truth. But sometimes the truth has such a heavy burden that you don't dare to share it. This is no ordinary biography. This is a description of what I saw. And I hope that after hearing what I have to say, you will be as moved as I was. It was April 2008. Spring in Washington was usually a beautiful time, the sakura trees blooming, people walking in the parks. But that spring, I felt a strange restlessness inside. At the time, I interpreted it as fatigue and stress from my work, but looking back today, I think that restlessness was a warning about what I was seeing. That night, at exactly 23:45, my phone rang. It was a senior official directly in charge of the ministry's security protocols. "Mr. Mortensen, we need you urgently on floor B3. We cannot share details over the phone for security reasons. Come to the meeting alone." At that moment I put down my documents and looked at the clock. The B3 floor was a restricted access area, usually where the most critical and classified documents were discussed. I had been down there several times during my tenure, but I had never received such a sudden call before. When I took the elevator down to B3, I was met with an even stricter security check than usual. My phone, my bag, and even my pen were left outside. I walked along a quiet corridor and finally stopped in front of a thick metal door, which was opened by a security officer who scanned my ID. When I entered, there were 4 people in the room, 2 military officials, an intelligence officer, and the officer in charge of security protocol who had called the meeting for me. In the center of the room was a file stamped classified. Even the color of the file was different from ordinary documents, with a dark red cover and the words "Top Secret, Eyes Only." They sat me down in front of the file and gestured me to read it with my eyes only, taking care not to speak. As soon as I opened the first page, goosebumps ran down my spine. Under the title UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, Observation Reports and Analysis, there was the kind of information that until then I had only heard in science fiction movies. On the first page, there were reports of several UFO sightings recorded from the mid-1980s to the early 2000s. These reports were based not only on the testimonies of witnesses, but also on radar images and video recordings of military aircraft. But the most striking was the information I came across on the next page. The second part of the documents contained a list of extraterrestrial materials in the possession of the United States. Details of these materials were accompanied by reports of scientific analysis. For example, one of them mentioned a piece of metal found in a desert area in 1997 that did not resemble any known alloy on Earth. It was stated that this metal had isotope imbalances in its microscopic structure and that it was impossible for such a substance to form in the Earth's atmosphere. When I turned to the next page, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was a monitoring report. In this report, it was written that extraterrestrials were watching humanity from a distance and that these observations had accelerated since the 1970s. The report stated the following. Observation tools were recorded in the form of unidentified light beams or objects. There has been communication, but it has been through signals and patterns rather than verbal or written communication. These entities have been identified as coming from outside our solar system. Observations indicate that these beings are limited to studying the Earth and avoid direct interference. When I got to the last page of the documents, there was a warning note in capital letters. This information is only accessible to authorized personnel. If leaked, national security would be jeopardized. As I closed the document, I realized that my hands were shaking. In that moment, I realized that what I was seeing was information that could radically change the history of the world. But the silence in the room and the pressure on me made it impossible for me to digest this information in that moment. The file was closed again and immediately placed in a safe deposit box. Someone said, "You can leave the room now, Mr. Mortensen. The meeting is adjourned." When I got home that night, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. When I laid my head on the pillow, it was impossible to sleep. There was only one thought running through my mind: if these documents are true, the world will never be the same. After that night when I saw the documents, I knew that my life would never be the same. The shock of that moment gave way to deeper confusion and uneasiness. The file I held in my hand and examined was not just a pile of documents, it was a key that went beyond the truths known to humanity, a key to the unknown. But I also knew that I would never be allowed to use this key. For a few weeks I was silent, going about my work, going about my daily routines, but I was struggling with a question that kept echoing inside me: if we are being watched, why is it hidden from the public? Every morning on my way to work, I would look at people walking down the street, most of them lost in the daily rush, caught up in the mundanity of life. No one was looking up at the sky or thinking about what might lie beyond this planet. Watching them, I felt strangely isolated, and I knew I couldn't share this secret with anyone. One day, while I was in the office again, dealing with a busy agenda, I received a cryptic message on my phone. The sender was one of the senior military officials present at the meeting that night. The message said only this: "You must not talk about this. Even the slightest hint about the content of the documents would jeopardize national security." This warning did not seem threatening, but it clearly drew a line. Even though I tried to delete and ignore the message, I could not get it out of my mind. Carrying this information was a heavy responsibility. But responsibilities come at a price, and that was learning to live with paranoia. One evening, I was sitting at home, staring blankly at the wall with a glass of whiskey in my hand. The documents I had reviewed that night began to replay in my mind. Some of the details written in those documents were too sharp and frightening to ignore. The documents said that there was communication with these beings, but not in the way we are used to. There was no sound, no words. Instead, patterns and electromagnetic signals were used. The chilling thing was that it was clearly stated that these signals were sent in an orderly fashion, that they came from a conscious source. The piece of metal in the documents was not just scientific data. It was like an invitation from another world. The report I saw said that the microscopic geometries discovered in the internal structure of this metal could be a kind of message. What struck me the most was the information that these beings were not from our solar system. Scientists had not been able to pinpoint the exact region from which these beings came, but they thought that they were not subject to the same physical laws as us, and perhaps did not even have a sense of time as we understand it. These details were engraved in my mind. Once you are exposed to such information, you can no longer focus on ordinary things. That night, I took a long look at the sky. All my life I had thought how beautiful the stars were. But that night, each star seemed like a pair of eyes. As if I was being watched from somewhere. After a while, I began to fight the urge to tell this secret to someone else. I had a few friends I had trusted for years, but I couldn't share this information with any of them. On the other hand, maybe there was a way to share this secret. If these documents were made public, people would face the truth. A few months after I saw those documents, I learned that one of the two people who had attended the meeting that night had suddenly been dismissed. No official announcement had been made, but the rumor in the ministry was that he had lost his job for talking too much. This information made me even more cautious. I had to keep what I had seen a secret, but the secret was becoming a heavier and heavier burden. One evening, on my way home from work, I noticed a car behind me. At first I thought it was a normal traffic element, but things changed when I realized that it was following me at the same distance for several blocks. As I approached my house, the car slowly turned around and took another road. This kind of incident was repeated several times. Maybe it was just my paranoia. But after seeing those documents, it was inevitable to live in the midst of such suspicion. Many years had passed since I saw those documents. Even now, when I lie in bed at night, I always think the same thing. Do people really think they are alone? I know that one day all this will be revealed, perhaps the biggest turning point in human history. But it will be revealed when people are ready for it. And I think that day is coming. Time has passed quickly since I saw those documents. Years have passed, but they have not faded a day from my memory. The theories explaining our world that have been tweaked, the existence of extraterrestrial material, and the details of attempts to communicate. All of this was a reality that was etched deep in the recesses of my mind. But keeping this knowledge became a burden I would carry for the rest of my life. I went on with my daily life, trying my best to look as if nothing had happened, but it is not an easy burden to know that behind the reality one sees every day, there is another reality. In every news bulletin, in every image of the sky, sometimes even in a moment of silence, I felt the echo of this secret. Some of the things I saw that night as I studied the documents still haunt me. The report gave an example of tests on extraterrestrial material. It said that a small piece of metal had a structure that could not be created by any known Earth technology. Its atomic structure was beyond any engineering principles known to mankind. Even at the microscopic level, this material was complex but organized, like a work of art. In another document, there was evidence of a communication network operating on a frequency that we cannot understand. The source of these signals came from a region outside our solar system. But what was even more interesting was that these signals were repeated at regular intervals. This could not be just a coincidence or a natural phenomenon. The most disturbing thing was this: in those documents, there were reports that extraterrestrials were not only watching us, but that some of them were interested in specific locations on Earth. The details of these locations were not disclosed, but why they were particularly interested in these locations was the biggest question mark. Last month, as I was flipping through my newspaper one morning, I noticed that one of the headlines struck me in a familiar way. It was the news that the US government was about to reveal more information about UFOs. It was about being prepared. They were saying that the House of Representatives was organizing UFO hearings and that there were former high-ranking figures who would testify. This news signaled that the silence in the documents I had analyzed that night was beginning to be broken. And you know what those documents said? People, it has been decided that this information can only be made public in due course. This process will be carefully managed so that the public does not panic. That's when I knew it was time. Now, as a former diplomat, with my career behind me, I can look back and say that those files completely changed my life. Above all, it shattered my perception of loneliness in this world. These days, every time I look up at the sky, I feel a strange peace, because I know that we are no longer alone. I don't know exactly where the eyes that are watching us are, but I am sure that they exist. And I can tell you this, very soon, this information will be revealed to the whole world. It is only a matter of time before the people know the truth. For now, look carefully at the sky. One day, at some point among the stars, you will notice the sign of those silent watchers.